Welcome to your Florida Civic Literacy Exam Master Review. In the next 15 minutes, you'll cover every major concept the FCLE tests: the foundations of American government, the Constitution, the branches, amendments, landmark cases, and key civic principles. Let's begin. Part 1. Foundations of American Government, expanded with key thinkers. To understand the foundations of American government, it helps to know the major philosophers and political thinkers whose ideas shaped the Constitution. These names appear often in civics courses, and understanding their contributions makes the principles easier to remember. Let's walk through each core principle and connect it to the people behind the ideas. 1. Rule of law, John Adams and the Magna Carta. Rule of law means no one is above the law, not citizens, not Congress, not the president. This idea traces back to the Magna Carta, 1215, the first major document to limit a king's power. John Adams, who said we should have a government of laws, not of men. The founders believed rule of law was essential to prevent tyranny. 2. Popular sovereignty, John Locke and Rousseau. Popular sovereignty means government power comes from the people. This idea comes from John Locke, who argued that people have natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and that governments exist only with the consent of the governed. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who expanded the idea of the social contract. The Declaration of Independence directly reflects Locke's philosophy. 3. Republicanism, Ancient Rome, Montesquieu, and Madison. Republicanism means citizens elect representatives to make decisions for them. Its roots include the Roman Republic, which used elected officials and checks on power. Montesquieu, who believed representative government prevents tyranny. James Madison, who argued in Federalist No. 10 that a republic protects against factions and mob rule. The founders believed direct democracy could be unstable, so they chose a representative system. 4. Federalism, Madison, Hamilton, and the Federalist Papers. Federalism divides power between the national government and the states. Key contributors include James Madison, who argued that dividing power prevents abuse. Alexander Hamilton, who supported a strong national government. The Federalist Papers, which explained why shared power was necessary. Federalism balances unity with local control. 5. Separation of powers, Montesquieu's most influential idea. Separation of powers divides government into 3 branches. This idea comes almost entirely from Baron de Montesquieu, who argued that liberty requires separating legislative, executive, and judicial powers. The founders adopted this structure to prevent any one branch from dominating. 6. Checks and balances, Madison's ambition versus ambition. Checks and balances ensure each branch can limit the others. This idea is connected to Montesquieu, who warned that combining powers leads to tyranny. James Madison, who wrote in Federalist No. 51 that ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Examples include the president can veto laws, Congress can override vetoes, the Supreme Court can strike down unconstitutional laws. 7. Natural rights, John Locke's core philosophy. Natural rights are the foundation of American political thought. Locke argued that all people are born with rights that cannot be taken away. Life, liberty, property. Thomas Jefferson adapted these ideas in the Declaration of Independence as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights justify the existence of government and limit its power. 8. Social contract theory, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. The social contract is the idea that people agree to form a government to protect their rights. Hobbes believed people needed strong government to avoid chaos. Locke believed government must protect rights or be replaced. Rousseau believed government must reflect the general will. The founders used Locke's version: government must protect rights or the people can change it. 9. Limited government, a reaction to British rule. The founders wanted a government strong enough to function, but limited enough to prevent abuse. The Constitution limits government through enumerated powers, checks and balances, and the Bill of Rights. 10. Consent of the governed, the heart of democracy. Consent of the governed means government only exists because the people allow it to. It comes from John Locke, who argued that legitimate government requires consent. The Declaration of Independence, which states that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. This principle is the foundation of elections and democratic participation. Part 2. The Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It begins with "we the people," emphasizing that authority comes from citizens. The Constitution has 3 main parts. Article 1. Legislative branch creates Congress and gives it the power to make laws, declare war, regulate commerce, and control federal spending. Article 2. Executive branch creates the presidency. The president enforces laws, commands the military, negotiates treaties, and appoints officials. Article 3. Judicial branch creates the Supreme Court and federal courts. Courts interpret laws and determine constitutionality. Part 3. The Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments protect individual freedoms. First, speech, religion, press, assembly, petition. Second, bear arms. Third, no quartering soldiers. Fourth, no unreasonable searches. Fifth, due process, no self-incrimination. Sixth, fair, speedy trial, right to a lawyer. Seventh, jury in civil cases. Eighth, no cruel or unusual punishment. Ninth, rights not listed still exist. 10th, powers not given to the federal government go to the states. Part 4. Important amendments. 13th, abolished slavery. 14th, equal protection and due process. 15th, voting rights for black men. 17th, direct election of senators. 19th, women's suffrage. 24th, no poll taxes. 26th, voting age lowered to 18. Part 5. The 3 branches. Legislative branch, Congress. House of Representatives, based on population. 2-year terms. Can impeach officials. Senate, 2 per state. 6-year terms. Confirms judges and treaties. Holds impeachment trials. Congress also controls the budget and declares war. Executive branch, the President. The President enforces laws. Powers include Commander-in-Chief, signs or vetoes bills, issues executive orders, appoints judges and officials, negotiates treaties. Judicial branch, the courts. The Supreme Court is the highest court. Its main power is judicial review, declaring laws unconstitutional. Part 6. How a bill becomes a law. Introduced in Congress. Committee review, debate and vote. Both chambers approve. President signs or vetoes. Congress can override veto with 2/3 vote. Part 7. Founding documents. Declaration of Independence. Natural rights. Reasons for breaking from Britain. Articles of Confederation. First government. 2 week. Federalist Papers. Essays supporting the Constitution. Part 8. Landmark Supreme Court cases. Marbury v. Madison. Judicial Review. McCulloch v. Maryland. Federal Supremacy. Gibbons v. Ogden. Interstate Commerce. Plessy v. Ferguson. Separate but equal. Brown versus Board of Education, ended segregation. Gideon versus Wainwright, right to a lawyer. Miranda versus Arizona, rights must be read. United States versus Nixon, limited executive privilege. Part 9, Key Civics Concepts. Now let's move into Part 9, the key civics concepts that explain how the Constitution actually works in practice. Supremacy Clause. The first concept is the Supremacy Clause. This clause, found in Article 6 of the Constitution, says that federal law is the highest law in the land. If a state law and a federal law ever conflict, the federal law wins every time. This prevents states from ignoring national laws and keeps the country unified. So if you see a question about a conflict between state and federal authority, the answer is almost always the Supremacy Clause. Elastic Clause, also called the Necessary and Proper Clause. Next is the Elastic Clause, found in Article 1, Section 8. This clause gives Congress the power to make any law that is necessary and proper to carry out its listed powers. Think of it like this. The Constitution gives Congress the basic tools, and the Elastic Clause lets Congress build whatever additional tools it needs to get the job done. For example, the Constitution doesn't mention an Air Force, but Congress can create one because it is necessary to raise and support the military. This clause is often connected to the case McCulloch versus Maryland, which strengthened federal power. Due process. Now let's talk about due process. Due process appears in two places. The Fifth Amendment, which protects you from unfair actions by the federal government, and the 14th Amendment, which protects you from unfair actions by state governments. Due process means the government must treat you fairly before taking away your life, your liberty, or your property. There are two types. Procedural due process. The government must follow fair steps, like giving you a trial, a lawyer, and a chance to defend yourself. Substantive due process. The laws themselves must be fair and cannot violate fundamental rights. If you see a question about fairness, trials, or government procedures, the answer is usually due process. Equal Protection Clause. Next is the Equal Protection Clause, part of the 14th Amendment. This clause says that states must treat people equally under the law. It is the foundation of many civil rights cases. For example, Brown versus Board of Education used the Equal Protection Clause to strike down school segregation. Loving versus Virginia used it to end bans on interracial marriage. If a question involves discrimination or unequal treatment, the Equal Protection Clause is the key concept. Judicial Review. Now let's look at judicial review. Judicial review is the power of the courts, especially the Supreme Court, to declare laws unconstitutional. This power was established by the landmark case Marbury versus Madison in 1803. Judicial review is one of the strongest checks on Congress and the President. If a law violates the Constitution, the courts can strike it down. If you see a question about the courts overturning a law, the answer is judicial review. Civil liberties versus civil rights. Finally, let's clarify the difference between civil liberties and civil rights, because the FCLE loves to test this distinction. Civil liberties are your fundamental freedoms, things the government cannot take away. These include freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to privacy, and the right to a fair trial. Think, liberties equals freedoms. Civil rights, on the other hand, are protections against discrimination. They ensure equal treatment regardless of race, gender, or other characteristics. Think, rights equals equality. If the question is about freedom from government interference, that's a civil liberty. If it's about equal treatment or discrimination, that's a civil right. Quick summary. Let's recap Part 9 in one sentence each. Supremacy Clause. Federal law is stronger than state law. Elastic Clause. Congress can stretch its powers when needed. Due process. The government must treat you fairly. Equal protection. Laws must apply equally to everyone. Judicial review. Courts can strike down unconstitutional laws. Civil liberties. Your freedoms. Civil rights. Your protections from discrimination. Part 10. Quick recall drill. Supreme law of the land. Constitution. Who makes federal laws? Congress. Who interprets laws? Supreme Court. First 10 Amendments. Right Arrow Bill of Rights. Case establishing judicial review. Marbury v. Madison. Amendment guaranteeing equal protection. 14th Amendment. Final advice. You don't need perfection, just a solid grasp of the big ideas. Focus on amendments, court cases, branches, and constitutional principles.
You've now completed the ultimate 15-minute FCLE study session. Repeat this recording as many times as you wish to help you absorb the information. You will do great.